Hi everyone, welcome.
And then do you edit it after, or is it just you just put it in the way it is?
I just put it in the way it is.
Your screen is frozen.
Okay. Yeah, that sometimes happens. All right. So, welcome to the 13th episode of Conceptualism. Today I have with me Jean-Pierre Leduc, who is a bass player, a voice actor, and a manager of artists, and uh,
Mhm.
and and we have been working together for two and a bit years, I think. And the
Yeah,
first,
that's when yeah, since about the time we met.
that's right. And the first time that we met was at Alvin Queen's masterclass at Concordia, I think,
That's right, with Ray Downs.
who is also on your label.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, he passed away in March.
Right,
So,
right. Yes, I remember that. And I mean, you have an interesting roster of artists, who sort of who defy categorization, I would say. You know, from people like
mhm.
like Guy Mintus to Mino, who who would be some like those two musical traditions. Definitely would say they're jazz or they're improvised in nature, but you know, but definitely coming from very different perspectives, I would say. And I like that because
Yeah, I
that
mean,
it shows a certain
mhm.
eclecticism, in your taste of music and also
Yeah,
the
I
people you're
mean, my
working with.
roster is yeah, my roster reflects the diverse taste in music that I have developed just over the years. Um, there's really no kind of music that I don't, no genre of music that I don't appreciate something in. I mean, even you'll hear people say, "Oh, I like all music except country." Well, I think that's ridiculous. It's like saying, to take one category and just wipe it out completely. Country is so diverse, just the same way jazz is diverse. And in fact, if you ask a lot of country musicians or jazz musicians what tracks that are perceived to be country that they think are some of the greatest things ever, you would be very surprised. Like there's a singer called Bobby Gentry. She's still alive. She's 80 something. She retired a long time ago, but her big hit was Ode to Billy Joe, and it's really Americana. So there's a blurry line between what people refer to as country and what you could also term roots Americana. And
Hmm.
there's so many artists that fall between the cracks. Like take for example Taj Mahal, who is ostensibly, if you had to categorize him, a blues musician, but you know, his career has been at the intersection of the Rolling Stones and many blues legends, and then his own stuff. I would just call it roots Americana. It's a very organic, acoustic, heartfelt kind of branch of the blues, I guess. And there's other artists too that come to mind. Nina Simone.
Hmm.
It's very it's not easy to categorize her. I mean, is she a jazz singer like Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald? No. She's more closely described as a soul singer, I would say.
Mm.
But again, she studied at she applied to study at the Curtis Institute in in the United States, and she was turned down, and that was to study classical music, and that was one of the great heartaches of her life was that because of her color of her skin, she wasn't accepted there. But anyway, it's fascinating the kinds of music that are uncategorizable. And
Right. Like, I mean, Miles Davis didn't look at himself as a jazz musician. He just looked at
no,
himself as a musician.
exactly. It's
And
just like
someone like
categorizing people, whether, this is why you know, there's so many ways we could go off into a tangent here, but it's the same thing with people, like categorizing people into whatever categories. And it's amazing these days how people are willing to be categorized. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't even, don't get me
people
started.
people seem to people people seem to hate ambiguity, and it's like that's actually where the most interesting stuff happens.
I know, and people are very complex, It's and then of course when people pass away, there's a whole sort of fascinating thing that happens where people try and revise what they meant, and say, oh well, Miles is this or Coltrane was that. I mean, these are very complex people with very complex personal lives, and it's very difficult, and it doesn't serve any purpose really to reduce people to these terms.
Yeah.
I think it's just music personally. Like I play in a classical symphony orchestra, as you know. I play the double bass, which is right next to me here, and that's my bass, which I've had since I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
And it's going to be 100 next year. It's was 1921 Hawks, made in London. So I love it. It's beautiful. Maybe I'll play something later. That's the lowest note. C. So I play in a classical symphony orchestra. We're on hiatus now because of COVID, but I'm also closely associated professionally with the jazz world and have been for many years, having worked since 1990 at Just in Time Records for 20 years until 2010. And then I branched off into management, and it was only logical that I would manage musicians of that genre principally, i.e. jazz. And so, so personally, I'm a classical musician, but I've also written pop songs as well. And I've recorded all kinds of music, including electronic music. And I've also worked as a DJ in nightclubs, in the late 80s and early 90s in Montreal.
What you're saying is you're hip.
Not at all. This is before, this was when DJs didn't, go around with their stupid headphones on and all the time. I mean, you would quickly put it on your ear for a second just to mix, but this whole notion now of pumping your fists in the air is pretty sad. But anyway, I like DJs that create as well,
Yes.
the ones that are adding beats and stuff like that, and
Definitely.
they've got all kinds of keyboards, and they're adding something to it rather than
masters of scratching and sampling and all the stuff that really makes a DJ a DJ. Like brings to mind somebody like Scratch Baston, who really sort of is a very technical DJ. And,
or what's his name, Rozelle.
Yes.
Who does that beatbox stuff with his voice? Amazing stuff.
And then there's also some Japanese noise musicians, experimental noise musicians, who do weird things with turntables. Like I saw this experiment where they put cymbals onto the turntables, and the needle was actually scratching into the cymbal, and that was used. Wow. That was used as a soundtrack. And I mean, it was painful to listen to, but it was very interesting. I wouldn't listen to that on a regular basis, but like as a novelty thing, or even as a conceptual art piece. I mean, it was very powerful.
Yeah, and then there's Inuit throat singing, which is quite fascinating too. You can kind of go into a trance listening to that.
Definitely, and like having a contact microphone on the throat when somebody's doing that. I mean, like you can seriously capture some unbelievable things with that. There was a student at Humber College who did throat singing while playing the saxophone as his recital, and I thought that was brilliant. Like,
Oh wow, yeah.
Because like combining.
And then Ray Anderson, the wonderful Ray Anderson, who I worked with for a time. He is an American trombonist, and he sings as well, and his throat is such that like his vocal cords. He can split. He can sing two notes at a time.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating. Ray Anderson.
Yeah.
If you listen to albums like Old Bottles, New Wine, there's a couple of tracks that are quite interesting. And then he does I'm Just a Lucky So and So, and he does a trombone solo, and then he'll do a vocal solo.
Oh, by the
Where
way, we're allowed to curse on this
what's
episode.
that?
Or we're allowed to curse on this podcast. Just
Oh, we are.
so
Wow.
you know. Yes, that's one of the reasons I started this, is so that there would be no censorship, and I would basically, I'd be able to talk about whatever one that needed to be said, and it would give the people that I was interviewing the freedom to say what needed to be said, so we could
Well,
talk
you know
about.
me, I never curse.
Oh, right, of course, of course. Yes, stalwart that you are. Yes, of course.
Yes.
Well,
Of curse.
I want to bring up, I want to bring up your collaboration and your management of Hank Jones, because I think that's that's something that's truly, remarkable, that you had the opportunity to work with somebody with that kind of ability, that ability to sort of move people with his pianistic, talent. You know, I mean, listening to his music is just remarkable, and yeah, you must have been very happy to have the opportunity to work with him. Can you tell us about that, and the experience that was?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was quite wonderful because over a period of 3 years, we traveled all over the world, and from the Grammy Awards Lifetime Achievement Award to the White House National Medal of Arts. It was really a time where he was being recognized, I think belatedly. I mean, he was always uh, revered in the jazz world because he did have, excuse me, he did have a very strong start, and he first came to New York well, he was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi, but then he was raised in Pontiac, Michigan, where
Mm,
his father worked for the company that became General Motors. Um, and Pontiac being close to Detroit, which is the center of the automotive world. So his father would, I think he was in charge of putting wood on they actually used actual planks of wood on the sides of cars that later became, it's the station wagons with the pretend wood on the side. Anyway, that's off topic. Hank was one of 10 children, and they were all encouraged to be involved in music. And then, so it shouldn't be so surprising that the family most associated with jazz that had three brothers, of the 10 children, three brothers are really not just jazz musicians, but iconic jazz musicians. I mean, Hank's two younger brothers, Thaddeus. There's a wonderful Blue Note album called The Magnificent Thad Jones. It's like a masterpiece. Um, you know, not everyone can become a household name, whether it's in architecture or painting or what have you.
yeah.
And so, we have household names like Coltrane and Miles Davis, but Thad Jones, I mean, my God, he was incredible. And people would applaud and commend Hank on things, and he'd say, "Well, listen, I'm nothing compared to my late brother." This he would say in interviews toward the end of his life, Hank. And it's true. Thad was an amazing trumpet player, very, very gifted and highly regarded arranger and composer. And, he didn't live as long as Hank. He died at age 68, I think, in Copenhagen. But, and then Hank's youngest brother, and I think really the youngest child of the whole slew of 10 kids, was Elvin Jones, the great drummer, closely associated with Coltrane because he was with the John Coltrane quartet for so many years. But then he became a band leader as well and really revolutionized drumming, you could say. So it was an amazing, illustrious musical family, the Jones family. I did a record on Just in Time with Hank. That's how I came to know him. And then later on, when he was having problems with his then manager, I just sort of off the cuff said, well, I could manage you if you like. And he said, oh, that's interesting. And then he thought about it and then called me back. So that's how it happened. So because somebody else wasn't doing such a great job, I was able to step in, and I was really happy. So I learned as I was going along, but it was a great school, if you will. Hank taught me a lot, and he also, I think, he appreciated that I was, a much younger person. I was able to just sort of get things done that he didn't maybe have the time or energy or inclination to do. So the thing that I did, because of his age, he was in his 80s at that time, I was able to get a lot of work for him because I was able to travel with him. So everywhere he went, I went. So I would fly to New York from Montreal, and then we would go off to wherever. There was one year we went to Europe 7 times. It's unbelievable because, as you might know, there's jazz festivals all throughout the year in Europe. There isn't a single month that is, there isn't something happening. Of course, not now, but in normal times. And so, yeah, and what else did we do? We did quite a few recordings during that time as well. So I got to be in studio with him, and just wonderful. And I took thousands of photos, literally, of him, which I'm putting together into a book. And I have some clips that nobody has seen, like musical clips of just magical things that I would like to make into a documentary film one day. That's another passion I have, is filmmaking. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's really beautiful, because I mean, when you work with someone in that capacity, then there's a certain intimacy there, because
Yeah.
you know certain things that just nobody else would know.
Yeah, and also I really learned a lot, not just in terms of facts and things like that, but also I learned to just listen.
Hmm.
It's something so important that is almost something that's lost in the world now, because people are always like yak 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 yak, and just like music where it's so many notes, it's very boring. The magic happens when there's silence, or the silence between the notes, and if there's dynamics as well. So it's the same thing with Hank. I learned to, if he was mad at me for something, nothing major, but just something that pissed him off or something, I learned to just shut up and listen and just accept that he wasn't happy about something, and that you let somebody let off their steam. And then the beautiful thing is, he's from that generation where, like with parents and children, you say what you think, you respect your elders, you get the message, and you move on. And the wonderful thing is that he would never hang it over my head, for weeks or months afterwards. It was dealt with, done, and that was it. But the thing not to do is to say, oh, but this, oh, I just said that because, or I just did this because, oh, let me explain. No, you don't explain.
Like getting into the
Listen,
at all.
you shut up, you learn from it, and you move on. And it's, yeah, it's very important to listen and respect your elders, if especially, it's somebody like Hank who really deserved and demanded the respect. And so it's a life lesson. It's not just it goes way beyond music.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I
There
think you're
were
right, and you're touching on a very important subject, which is that because a lot of kids today and a lot of people, a lot of youth don't really don't respect their elders, and don't they don't have that they don't have
well,
that.
I think it's also about attention spans. The problem that's first for my generation was that I was maybe the second generation raised on television. I guess my mother's father wouldn't, my grandfather wouldn't allow a television into the house for the longest time. when she was a teenager. So they didn't have it, but she was the first generation of TV watchers, technically. Um, and so it's bad enough. My point is that it's bad enough growing up with my generation with television, because it created uh, it destroyed people's attention span, because it programs people to be able to sit through maybe 20 minutes and then expect a break, because of based on advertising. And so this is
And now
and
with
now
YouTube.
with telephones, with smartphones, it's absolutely terrible. It's a huge worldwide problem on many levels. I mean, if you could tabulate, and I'm surprised people don't talk about this more often, the number of people that are hit by cars worldwide every day because they were looking at their phone. You just don't hear about it. You'll see an article in the paper saying woman struck on such and such a street at midnight or something. But what they don't tell you is that chances are she wasn't looking where she was going, or the driver was not looking where he or she was going and was texting while they were driving, or maybe both of them. So they didn't have a chance. And so getting back to the purposes of our talk about music and life, um, it's a very sad thing where it's like as I was saying with Hank, where I learned to just stop talking and listen and learn the lesson. It's the same thing. Turn off your phone, put your phone away, turn it off, put it in another room. There's a time for phones and there's a time not for phones. And I'm just as guilty as anyone else, but you have to remind yourself. It's like when you're driving, you have the urge to see who just texted you because you hear the ding sound, and just don't, because it could be the last thing that ever happens before your body goes through the windshield. I mean, and it's the same thing in life. Like you're figuratively going through the windshield because you're missing these beautiful moments that are right in front of you, but you're staring at your phone.
Yeah.
Another perfect example is where imagine you have a masterclass with somebody like Hank or Herbie Hancock or something, and you have all these people are holding their phone like this while it's going on. I mean, of course it's going to be taped, and you'll be able to find it on YouTube. So just don't sit there and holding your phone.
It's also
Just
so
experience it,
disrespectful.
listen to it while it's
Yeah,
actually happening, you know?
exactly. Because we live in this culture where it's like, unless you have a video or a picture, it's like, oh, it didn't happen. So
Yeah.
maybe one of the reasons the kids actually do this is because,
Hmm.
they'll be like, oh, I had a masterclass with Herbie Hancock, and they'll be like, oh, do you
Yeah.
have a photo? Do you have a video? And like, and if they say no, then suddenly, their peers are gonna say, ah, you're making it up. You're full of shit, whatever. And so,
Yeah,
but
and the other thing is, it's like squirrels burying nuts and then not remembering where they put them. It's how many times do people actually go back and look at the films that they took on their phone and actually watch them? Never, precisely never, you know, or maybe they posted one thing occasionally. But yeah, it's a
But
big
there's also
problem.
this culture of live streaming, JP. There's also this culture of live streaming stuff. So like they'll do a Facebook live stream or an Instagram live stream, of whatever experience they're having, whether it's a concert or a masterclass.
Sure.
They'll put it straight onto the web, and that's
Mhm.
also quite disrespectful because like imagine if I don't know, something happens or something embarrassing, or I don't know, like maybe people don't want to be captured in this way, so it's
Mhm.
also a consent thing, because like
Exactly. Yeah.
if the show is being taped, then the artist would have given consent for that, whereas you taping the artist, okay, first of all, you probably haven't gotten their consent, and second of all,
Mhm.
like, why are you wasting your time doing that,
Yeah.
like it's like you said, like being present, being in the moment, like that's what that experience is for. It's not for you to
Hmm.
somehow capture it and try to relive it, because really
Yeah.
that's not the point. And really, who's like, when you capture it on a cell phone, and you watch it back, it's like it's never going to be the same as actually paying attention fully.
No,
you're
exactly.
probably
Yeah.
you're probably going to miss important things that the artist says and does because you're too busy looking on your phone screen to make sure that the angle is correct or something, you know
Yeah.
so
Also, sometimes I play in the street with a friend of mine, and he plays saxophone. And so, believe it or not, double bass and tenor sax go quite well together without any other accompaniment. And so people come up and, we're not really doing it for money, but people do drop money into our case. But the interesting thing is people feel that they can come right up to us while we're talking and shout their requests, like while they're filming us. Like they think that we're like a jukebox. They're going to interrupt. Number one, interrupt what we're doing. So complete lack of respect. Number two, it throws off our concentration. We might have been in a really amazing groove. So for every person that does that, thankfully, there's people that just hang back and listen. But again, it goes back to the respect thing, respect for music. And that brings me to another point, which is that the whole problem now is that with at least one, if not two generations, because of downloading, people don't value music. And that goes to everyone. People just have this perception that music is free. And so that's reflected in what I just described when I was playing with my friend on the street. People just think we're there for their enjoyment, and they don't understand or respect that it's a process, that we're in a kind of trance, and we're trying to focus on something we're creating. And again, it's this culture of interruption and lack of respect.
Yeah.
So it's very pervasive. So the reason why we were playing outside was because my orchestra was on hiatus because of COVID. So I need to keep my fingers, with the calluses that we have when you're playing the string,
Definitely.
when you have to keep those ends of your fingers calloused. It has to be hard, otherwise it just becomes too painful to play again. So here we are trying to just do this for that reason only, really.
Right.
And because it's the only outlet. And then you just feel like packing up and going home because people are so nuts. But anyways, we still do it anyway, because the power of music is so strong that even an off night is good, because it's a release. We get to play, and it's a wonderful thing that we have this outlet, this creative outlet, this way of expressing ourselves.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. And it's the same thing. Like if you play, the djembe or the tabla, or the doumbek. Like if you don't practice, then your hand, it loses that. You could call it a callus, or even the shape of like your skin that becomes affected by playing the instrument. So you actually lose that sound. So that makes complete sense to me. And actually, I'm friends with another bass player who's based in Montreal, Alex Bellegarde, and he was the first person to tell me, that if I don't play the bass, for a week or so, then my sound is completely messed up, because I don't have the calluses anymore. And and
I find the key is I have this stand. This is why this bass is just standing here, like somewhat. It appears to be standing here magically next to me, but it's because it's on a stand. And I find it's on a stand because it makes it more inviting for me to just pick up.
Right.
If it's away in a corner and I have to if I have to wander through a bunch of furniture to get to it, then I won't. Well, I'm not saying I won't practice, but I would be less inclined to do that.
I totally understand.
You make it accessible and all set to go, and you have to put this dampits in it which goes into the little hole like that, just like violins have, to keep it climatized, right? That's the thing here.
Yeah.
It's called a dampit. And you just run that under the tap, and then put that in there, and it prevents the wood from cracking or anything like that.
Right.
Keeps the moisture there. So what was I saying? Yeah. So you have to make the instrument accessible so that you're
and inviting.
You have to maintain the instrument, which is also another form of respect, even though it's not a human being, it might as well be,
Absolutely.
because you have to love it and respect it.
For sure. Yeah. Um, I just recently I did an art project, which is, I painted my guitar, and like, and also, that thing that some people do to their guitars where they put scratches or dents or whatever into it to make it look like it's older, and that it's been road worn.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so I seriously, yeah, I did a like a whole remodeling of my guitar, and I showed it to my mom, and she nearly fainted. She's like, "What the hell is wrong with your guitar?"
Oh, she didn't like it?
Well, I mean, she sort of hid her, I think she thought that I was not being respectful to the guitar or
Oh,
something,
I see. Yeah.
you know but no, to me it was like, it was, I think actually the now that I painted over it and I did all this, modification, it actually kind of looks like a, like something you'd see in a museum. Like the guitar
Yeah.
suddenly has a ton of character, and like, from the second that you look at it, it's mine, whereas before there was no signs that it was my guitar. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
and
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, it's kind, I don't know, it's kind of like a statement, or like a public art statement or something, because now whenever I perform on the guitar, everyone's gonna, like, remember that this is what this guitar looks like. So it also becomes like a
Yeah.
visual thing. It also becomes like, just like, Monk used to wear these funny hats and stuff, and people started associating, the funny hats with Monk. So like, in the same way,
Yeah.
like if you have a custom instrument, whether it's a Fazioli piano, or, I don't know, a vintage Stratocaster or something, it's like people
Hmm.
start to associate that instrument with you, and with your personality, you know
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and like you said, the the idea of loving and respecting the instrument like it was a human being. I mean,
Hmm.
that to me is like really important, because I learned that when I was playing tabla. My guru said, you've got to treat the drums like they're human beings. The
Hmm.
treble drum is the female, the bass drum is the male, and you sort of have to respect the drums, as if they're people. um
Yeah.
and like, and so to me at the time, that concept was very bizarre, because I was like, no, they're inanimate objects. I don't have to, like, I didn't get it. But now looking back, like, that was
Hmm.
such an important lesson. And
Yeah. And my friend, whose name is also JP, Jean-Philippe, he plays piano. He's quite good also. And I have my grandmother's old piano here.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, I've
and
played it.
yeah, you've played it. And it's a Mason and Hamlin, from, it's also from the turn of the century, I believe. And I think it might be 1915. And when I told Hank that I was getting this, he said, "Oh yeah, Coleman Hawkins used to have an upright Mason and Hamlin," so it was nice. But anyway, you know, Jean-Philippe, he has a electric keyboard at home, but when he comes to my apartment, he loves it because, he's, you know, the, he can't practice at the conservatory because it's closed, because of COVID. And so it's a great way that we can make music. It's too cold now to play on the street, and we're not allowed to play on the metro, because of the COVID as well.
Hmm.
But the metro is really cool in Montreal. The sound is so beautiful. We did this last year before all this happened, and it was quite wonderful to do that. And just the sound echoing can inspire our next musical selection, because we're thinking you're tripping on all this beautiful
Yeah.
reverberation and echo and everything. And you think, oh, let's try so and so that we practiced the
I
other
mean,
day. That would sound amazing in here. And so
it's a
each thing
gorgeous,
touches
like,
up.
it's
Yeah,
it's a gorgeous, actually, maybe, and this is an idea, maybe you can actually, like, do a recording in there after the metro is closed for the night. You could get
yeah.
a
Maybe
proper,
get
like, a,
special
yeah, like a
permission or
permission,
something.
yeah, like some sort of permit, where, like, you'd get
Yeah.
maybe even a whole orchestra in there. And like, can you imagine, like, some sort of project where, like, the OSM would go into the metro and, record
Hmm.
in those beautiful long hallways with the bricks
Yeah.
and stuff,
It
and
would
like
be
you
really
have
nice.
microphones set up everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
that would be insane. Like, that would be such an interesting project, and like the
Yeah.
video would look so cool, like,
Yeah.
of this
I
gorgeous,
don't know if you remember, shortly after Justin Trudeau was elected the first time, um, he greeted people. He went down into the metro and greeted people like coming out of the turnstiles. A great idea. It was a brilliant idea in our social media age to have him do that. So
Yeah.
good for him.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and Montreal has so many
Yeah.
architectural gems. Like, that there's so many incredible spaces to play in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many churches. There's
yeah.
Of course, the Maison Symphonique is such a beautiful space as well.
It's so gorgeous. I've played in there many, many times because the orchestra that I'm in, which is called Ensemble Sinfonia de Montréal, is directed by Louis Lavigueur, and I've worked with some great conductors in my life, and he's really right up there with anyone that I've worked with, like Andrew Davis or Mario Bernardi, Kurt Sanderling. Louis Lavigueur is just top notch. He's such a pleasure to work with because he's got a wonderful sense of humor. He's so proficient in so many languages, especially the languages that are the most important for music, like Italian and German. And just his knowledge is so inspiring. And, when you play the double bass and you live in a city like Montreal, it's really not fun in the middle of a snowstorm we don't cancel rehearsals because it's snowing hard. We don't, that's not the way we live here, as you know. So you really have to love music is my point, because it's not fun putting on your boots and getting on your coat and everything and going out into the snow with your bass and putting it in the car, parking the car, bringing the instrument in, and then, it's really awful. But then when you work with somebody like Louis, and then all the wonderful people that are my colleagues in the orchestra, we're 65 members, and then we start, rehearsing, it's just like, oof, it's like heaven. Yeah, it's wonderful because I just can't imagine my life without it. It's just as important as breathing or sleeping.
Well, and you represent the conductor of your ensemble,
yeah, there's I think there's all kinds of things that we can do. I don't represent him really in the I have him on my website because there's a number of projects that we have discussed in the past and that I still want to explore because it's a very unique orchestra, and I think Louis is an unsung. Ryan changed that, but yeah, it's another ongoing project. But he's such a busy person that it's not exactly a lot of these relationships are a two-way street. As you know, as we have worked together, that you have to inspire each other and keep each other informed. Louis is extremely busy with well, of course not now because all his things are on hiatus, but yeah, he's got an incredible schedule of events, and he's got more than one musical ensemble. It's just the one I'm in is just one of many.
Right.
So yeah, but he's really amazing.
So I wanted to ask you about Kebu, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Who's that?
Kebu.
Oh yeah, Kebu.
Kebu.
Yeah, Kebu is a keyboardist, and he is, I guess, kind of in the tradition of somebody like Rick Wakeman,
Right.
Mike Oldfield, but also like some modern. Well, I can't really think of a DJ that also plays along with his tracks, but there are. I'm not sure if somebody like DJ Tiesto does things like that, but Kebu is a creator. He's not a DJ, but his music appeals to that crowd. You could book him at a festival, and people would be, you know, pounding their fists in the air because he's he's completely obsessed with old keyboards and gear, and, you know, collects all these old Moogs and things like that, vintage keyboards, and he gets amazing sounds out of them. He is from Scandinavia,
Okay.
and he has done a number of albums which are quite interesting, and I'm keen to bring him over here. Of course, it's going to have to be a couple of years from now, but we're trying to get him some sponsorship deals, and also work with some airlines in his country so that we'll be able to do that. But the good thing is he would just travel by himself, you know. And then I have another new artist, Nicolas Congiano, who is, I saw him busking on the street in Old Montreal one day. And I was really struck by his artistry. He's got, he's singing, playing guitar, and he's got all these effects pedals.
Right.
And it was quite wonderful to see him work a crowd that was just accumulating all kinds of new listeners from the spell he was weaving. You know, really understands melody and harmony and space. And so he's only 20 years old, just like yourself. And but he's got a really special vibe to him. So he's an artist in development. I work with some people who are, you know, in the, I guess, twilight of their careers, and also some people who are just emerging. So it's nice to have both, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I wanted to tell you that actually, there's this collective that I formed. It's called the Cymatics Collective, and you know, we just recently went into a studio number 9 in Toronto, and recorded a
Mm-hmm.
free jazz album. You know, and
Oh, I would like to hear that.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're currently, you know, because we recorded about an hour and a half worth of material just from start to finish. We took no breaks, no stops. So now we're trying to find the natural you know, places where things can be cut and made into songs to make it
Oh, very nice.
make it more approachable, and to make it.
Yeah, so you just got the raw material.
That's right. That's right. And then of course it's going to go through the mixing and mastering phase,
Yeah,
and we're also thinking of doing some music videos, you know, which are sort of like either like shadow puppetry or animation of some kind, which would then
very nice.
you
Hmm.
know, give the music some sort of visual component as well, which is
Yeah, that's nice. I would like to hear that.
yeah, and we actually think of it. We kind of think of it as an interesting way, like you know, like if a game, like if you put the music as the soundtrack of a game, it would make perfect sense. You know,
Yeah.
that's
What is the instrumentation? You're playing keyboards and percussion?
no. I'm playing synthesizers, and prepared piano. I use
Uh-huh.
Tibetan singing bowls to prepare the strings
Oh, nice.
of the piano, and then I have a drummer who also like very experimental drum kit, like you know, like very weird cymbals, custom made cymbals. We used a
Okay.
few hand hammered cymbals that I personally customized, and one cymbal that was intentionally rustic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we use some
Mm-hmm.
unusual instruments, and also a handmade djembe that I brought into the recording, and then the guitarist, and the guitarist is like a jazz guitarist, but you know, is a pedal aficionado, and so has this huge collection of pedals, which he then uses to make really like incredible sounds. You know,
Wow, nice.
so it sounds very full, even though there's 3 musicians. It could be a whole orchestra worth of sound.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm also working with a Thai drummer, and she is, I don't know, 20 something,
Uh huh.
maybe a little older, not sure. But she's a very small woman, but she's got a real sound, and she's playing a drum kit, and she's really kind of I guess you would say it's R&B,
Huh.
but it's also very spacey too. And she was part of a collective of all women group, and but now she's branched off by herself. So she calls herself Celine and the Infinite Connection. And but she's just wonderful. I first heard her on the street when there was a street fair and all the traffic was cut off, and an outdoor fair. And she was just sitting there with her drums, just whacking out a beat without anyone around her. She just set up her things, and she's just like this, and it was riveting. It was so great. I could just sit there for an hour and watch her, And I have a little clip of it somewhere on my phone.
That's really
Speaking
cool.
of phones, and but yeah, so she's just put out this video, and it's really a R&B kind of soul type thing. But it's wonderful because she's a woman and she's a drummer, and you don't see that every day. And she's a very pleasant person to work with. She's very, very attractive, and I just think that all those things go together, and to making her appealing. I think she would be a great artist to book for outdoor events at festivals. Your collective that you just described, that you just recorded in Toronto, that would be a good thing to push for outdoor
Festivals, yes.
festivals too.
Definitely, I agree. No,
Yeah.
it's the perfect kind of music because
Try and find the moments that are where some kind of
magic is happening.
magic happened, but that's also a kind of magic that you think would be accessible
Yeah,
to,
because
and then
we got
and then
into some
run with
serious
that.
grooves. We got
Yeah.
into some serious grooves, man. We had some seriously heavy shit going down. Like
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could do some editing, and then you could add some effects to it.
yeah,
You should check out the label that Bill Laswell had for a while that was under the umbrella of Island Records. It was called Axiom, Axiom.
cool.
But he did all this kind of things like transmutation and stuff like that. Which brings me to another group I'm working with out of Switzerland, which is called Sonar.
Mm.
And Sonar, and they're a quartet based in Zurich, Switzerland, but they have done 3 records now with guitarist David Torn, who records for ECM Records. David was in the first group that I ever booked in my life in the mid-90s, which was called Polytown. And I booked this group while I was still working for the record company, just because they needed somebody to book it. And I thought, okay, I'll try. And then both concerts in Montreal and Toronto sold out. And it was with Terry Bozzio, the drummer,
Yes.
David Torn, and the guitarist from the British group called Japan, Mick Karn, and he passed away sadly a few years ago. Anyway, it was a trio called Polytown. Anyway, so this group I'm working with now, Sonar, I'm reunited with David Torn, who was in that group. And because of COVID, I haven't been able to book anything as yet, but I'm very excited about them, and their music is very, very trippy. And I'll send you a link or something you can listen to, because it sounds a little bit like what you were describing to me. Although there's no keyboards in Sonar, it's 3 guitarists, 1 bass player, and 1 drummer. Because they're a quartet normally, but they've with 2 guitarists, but they've added David Torn, who also has produced the last 3 records, and is very, very trippy. It's so cool. I've had, for example, just to give you an idea, I have it in my CD player in my car, and I have 5 CDs in the car on the player, but I only ever listen to that one. Because it's just, I never get tired of it. And that's an amazing thing to me. Like, to be working with a group that you just never tire of is quite magical.
That truly is. Yeah. And every time you listen to it, it becomes more nuanced, and you learn more things.
Yeah, it's instrumental, but it's almost like a David Bowie record without David Bowie. Like, it's that interesting sonically. you know.
Like the Berlin trilogy type stuff.
Not too far from that, but the main composer of the group, Stefan Dalen, is also a mathematician. So it's quite interesting. He's American born, but I think his parents were Swiss, and that's why he moved back to Switzerland. And he's written music. His new record, actually, he's not even playing on it. It's music that he wrote for two different string quartets, including the Kronos Quartet.
Very cool.
And he records for this label in London, which is a wonderful label called Rare Noise Records. And that's run by his wonderful friend of mine, Giacomo Bruzzi. And very eclectic label. And so Sonar, the Swiss group, they record for that label as well.
Well, and
so yeah,
this kind of reminds me of, you know, the idea. Well, I mean, Lunched is also a label as well as being
it's a label, but I mean, I started it as a label because I had this idea of putting out records that I had made myself, and I still want to do that, but it's a label in theory, and it's always had its own website for like lunchrecords.com, but I haven't issued any recordings yet. But hey, the night is young.
Yes, well, I mean, there's lots of time, and well, you know, and it's always, I mean, it's great that you have that component to it, because that means that, you know, when you do decide to release something,
Yeah, I mean,
then the
it's in
space
the
is there.
yeah, I mean, my background is in that. As a musician, I started off singing in boys' choirs in Toronto,
Right.
and that's how my musical life started, really. I was such a loud kid. I was always making so much noise, and my mother and sister would always be like telling me to shut up. Or why don't you join a choir? So I did. And here we are.
Well, I also had the same problem, which with people telling me to shut up, you know. Well, do you remember that time where I played at St. Joseph's Oratory, on that huge organ, the 5 keyboard instrument there that they have at St. Joseph's?
Yes. Yeah,
Well, you know,
I do.
I have the I
Yeah,
have
that was wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I have the recording of that whole session on like on tape. Like I've got the whole thing. I've got the whole session recorded, you know.
Hmm.
And and
Wonderful.
it's like, I think of it as an absolute treasure trove of like sampling opportunities, because
Oh, yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
like I mean, there are such interesting sounds there and sonic possibilities, which, you know,
Yes.
like, which you can then, you know, you can take a sample or set of samples and you can plug that into a workstation, or, you know, like one of these keyboards, and you can suddenly have all these sounds being triggered, you know, by a synthesizer or by a keyboard of some
Yeah.
sort. And yeah, I think that would be really interesting in terms of like making an installation. That's something that I've been working on recently, is the idea of doing an installation, like
Yeah.
with Spark or something like that, you know, where I'd have a bunch of speakers set up, and, you know,
Yeah.
and some sort of sound installation. Um, and I think that kind of thing, it's been done in
Yeah.
Montreal.
And try and you can create some kind of create some kind of rhythmic groove,
Mm,
and then try and use the recording that you have, and try and lay it over that. It could be quite interesting. That's how I kind of that's what kind of makes me pick up the bass a lot, is that I start off just by doing sometimes the same thing, and then just branch off, like just some really fun groove to play, and then it just gets me going just by the sheer sound of it. I can play you what I mean if you want.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Okay. Well, the bass is here, but just something like that's the lowest note, and then I was just using the lowest note and the highest note. So Why is that vibrating? Okay, here we go. And then always coming back to that note, you know, using that as the kind of like,
anchor.
How do you say, like trans note, kind of like almost like, if you were here, you would feel the whole apartment shaking. So that's the kind of groove. I'll start off on a groove like that, and even though I'm a classical player, I mean, when you're improvising music, as you know, it's fun to whatever can get you going, you know.
Definitely.
It's like exercising, you know. We all know we should be exercising, but it's pretty rare to find somebody who's like really enthusiastic about exercising. I mean, they do exist, but sometimes we have to force ourselves to do it. And then once we are doing it, we love it, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing with music. We want to play, but we have to create the conditions. Definitely. So that it's not only so that when we do get that signal in our brain, then we can just go boom, and it's right. Like you can't have your piano covered in boxes. You have to.
No, it's got to be.
Have it be an open and inviting.
Definitely.
Inviting.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. Like you said, you've got to create these conditions where you feel inspired to play. Because if you're in a space where that's not the case, then suddenly, you know, a month could go by and you haven't played a single note.
That's right. There, you just created the lyrics for your song. If you're in a space where that's not the case.
That could be a good poem too. Actually,
exactly.
There's been a lot of, I've been working, because I write poetry too. So I've been
that's right.
I've been working on trying to put music to some of my poems. And
you're the modern day Rumi.
You have no idea how much of a compliment that is. I'm just gonna try not to let that get to my head. Now you basically inflated my ego like 50 times.
I've created a monster.
Damn straight. No, because like, okay, I have such admiration for Rumi, and like, I mean it's like, you know, Rumi's on the same level as Shakespeare, as Einstein, as, you know, any of these.
Oh yeah, it's very fascinating to listen to people that knew him and to hear their stories. It's just like so deep. It's unbelievable.
Well, and his spiritual master, or the sheikh, was Shams Tabriz, and Shams was, well, I mean, Shams was the reason that Rumi turned from a stuffy academic into the soul-searching, you know, invigorating poet that he's known today to be. You know, so it was really because of Shams that Rumi became the poet and the legend that he is. So there's actually a whole collection. Oh, go ahead.
No, my takeaway from Rumi is that it's the essence. He's able to sort of distill the essence of what is important in life in an illuminating way that is also extremely life affirming and inspirational. In a way that is intense and intriguing, and not banal like so much of the kind of culture that surrounds meditation and yoga and things like that. There's a lot of bland platitudes that are involved with that, and the same way that there's a lot of bland music associated with that, such as, you know, the new age music at its worst, you know. But when you get into somebody like Rumi, or you know, Swami Prabhupada or somebody like that, and and some of the books that you can buy from Shambhala, it's quite interesting to to find that at the core and at their best, they're able to tap into and describe what uh, is important in life in a profound way. And it's quite often it's right there in front of you, and it was available all along, but you just didn't see it, you know. Again, it's going back to what I was saying about Hank, and or what I was talking about with the orchestra, and the importance of being in the moment and really truly experiencing something, and being open to receive it, you know. Like Keith Richards, who I just love, from the Rolling Stones, he talks about music in such a non-egotistical way, as a, you know, he doesn't call himself a guitar god or a rock star or whatever. Of course he is all those things, but if you read an interview with Keith Richards, wow, it's just as inspiring to me to as reading something like by you know, Alan Watts or something.
Mm.
He's really lived, and he's really he's capable of really inspiring, um, from in imparting what he's learned in life, in in way. I can't see you. What are you doing?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just kind of uh, like hunched in my chair. I should sit with a straight back.
Richards, but I think it's just because I was talking about life lesson, not important.
Well, I think I think definitely there are players who talk about themselves with a certain amount